Hello and welcome to the latest video from Mental Modeler. My name is Stephen Gray and I'm here with
Allison Singer.
And we are both at Michigan State University. And today's video is going to show you in 9 easy steps how to access the Mental Modeler tool, how to build a mental model, how to evaluate it for its structure and for its scenario capabilities, and then how to save a model. So the first thing to do is to access Mental Modeler from the online tool. And it's easiest to use the web browser, either Firefox or Google Chrome. It works best in those browsers. And just navigate to the Mental Modeler website, which is mentalmodeler.org or mentalmodeler.com. In the menu bar, you'll see Software. Click on Software. If this is your first time accessing the software, you can ask for a username and a password by registering here. And then click on this link to take you to the online modeling suite. Once you're on the online modeling suite, and you'll need the latest version of Flash for this to work, you can see the concept mapping interface where you can add different components and begin to build your model. So step 2 is about how to make a model. And the first thing you do is you have to think about the central components relative to the system you're trying to model, the system you're trying to represent, and what are the relationships between those components. So, Allison, let's take the example, how does coffee impact my productivity and sleep? What are kind of the central components to understanding that question and modeling that question kind of as a system of interactions?
I think the 3 central components are right there in the question, and we have coffee, sleep, and productivity.
All right, so let's go to Mental Modeler. And once we're back in Mental Modeler, we can see, what were those components again? Coffee, we had productivity, and finally sleep. So we've kind of defined the central components of our system. Now, what are the relationships between these components?
I think the more coffee I drink, the more productive I am. So that's a positive relationship.
All right, so as you can see, there's a positive and a negative. And is that a lot or a little?
Probably a medium amount.
All right, there we go. What else?
And the more coffee I drink, the less sleep I get.
All right, the more coffee, less. Is that a lot or a little?
A lot less sleep.
Okay. Anything else?
And the more sleep I get, the more productive I am.
Okay. So as this increases productivity. Anything else?
Probably the more sleep I get, the less coffee I drink because I don't need it as much.
All right. So the more sleep you get, the less coffee. Is there anything else?
I think that's about it.
So as you make your model, one thing to remember is that these need to be things that can go up or down in quality or quantity. So here we've defined the relationship between coffee, and as it increases, it decreases the amount of sleep. And as coffee increases in this relationship, it increases productivity at work. So remember that components need to be something that can increase or decrease. And when trying to figure out the directionality and whether it's positive or negative between those components, think when component 1 increases, does it decrease or increase component number 2? And is it a small, medium, or large amount? And you can put that on the slider. So step 2 is about defining other relevant components and relationships between them, aside from those central components. So Allison, what are the other things that might affect the relationship between coffee, productivity, and sleep?
I think stress is an important component.
All right. Stress, and how is that related?
And I think that the more sleep I get, the less stress I have.
Less stress. Okay, fair enough. Anything else?
Yeah, and I think maybe the more stress I have, I might be more productive at work.
That's fair.
Probably just a little bit.
Just a tiny, we'll just move that up just a little bit. Right there. Okay. What else? Anything else?
Yeah, maybe we can add in irritability.
Irritability. Right, and how is that related?
Well, I think that the more coffee I drink, I might get irritated more easily. So that would be a positive relationship.
All right. Is that related to anything else?
Maybe irritability is related to sleep in
Okay.
the sense that if I am more irritated, I get less sleep.
Okay. And is there also, here you have a feedback relationship. Is there also a relationship maybe?
Well, that should be a negative relationship.
Absolutely. Change that.
Oh, and I see what you're saying. Yeah, so the more sleep I get, probably the less irritable I am.
All right. Anything else?
I think that looks good.
All right. And you can imagine building out from these central concepts and getting something that's got 20, 30 or so concepts and becoming a pretty complex model. So now we've made a pretty good model. We've defined the central concepts and the links between them, and then also some other additional components that have indirect relationships. Now I want to talk a little bit about evaluating our model for structure. So Allison, where do we go to evaluate the model to look at the structural characteristics?
Oh, that's a really good question. I think we go to preferred state and metrics.
And these are going to be network metrics based on what you presented in the model. So Allison, how many components are in your model? How many things?
5.
All right, and we can go back to the model and validate that. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. How many connections?
9.
All right. You can read the screen. That's great. You can also calculate density, which is a ratio of all possible combinations between components, the connections, and how many components you have. The number of connections per component, which is kind of related to density. Driver concepts, receiver concepts, and ordinary concepts. Driver concepts are going to be things that only have an arrow out, and we see that there's 0. So we go to the model to see. And indeed, nothing just has a relationship out. Everything has at least one feedback relation back to it. Receiver concepts are ones that just have an arrow into it, and there's 1. Let's see if we can figure out what that one is. That one appears to be productivity. And also the number of ordinary concepts. And ordinary concepts are going to be things that have arrows both in and out, which is most of the components in our model. We could also look at which one is the most important by looking at centrality. So we can click on centrality and it'll order it by the number of connections and the weights on those connections to show which one has kind of disproportional network structure to everything else. And in this particular case, sleep has the most arrows in with the most weights on it, followed by coffee, irritability, productivity, and stress. And so if we go back, we can kind of see that coffee definitely has a lot more things going from it and also going to it. So Allison, does this make sense as far as, does you think this is the structure that makes most sense based on the model that you were trying to produce?
Well, I do think that sleep is really important. So yeah, it makes sense to me.
All right, so now that we've evaluated our model for overall structure and seen kind of what are the more important parts and how they're related to one another, let's talk about evaluating your model through different scenarios. So Allison, now we can evaluate our model by running a what-if scenario. Where do you think we go to run a what-if scenario?
I am guessing the scenario button.
You would be correct. And under this tab, you can run different what-if scenarios by increasing or decreasing any of the things in your model. And there are different assumptions you have for the scenario output. I would usually pick either sigmoid or hypertangent. And what you want to do is you want to evaluate what the scenario is based on what you think would have happened. So in this particular case, let's say that we're going to increase coffee. And how do you think the system's going to react? What do you think is going to happen to productivity when you increase coffee?
I think it will go up.
What do you think is going to happen to sleep?
Go down.
What about stress?
I'm not sure.
Okay. What about irritability?
Maybe it would go up.
Yeah, the more coffee you have?
Mm-hmm.
All right, so let's see. All right, Allison, so it looks like productivity is in the right direction. When you have more coffee, you increase productivity. When you have more coffee, you decrease sleep. It looks like stress increases a little bit for some reason, and that irritability also increases. So is this about what you would have expected?
Yeah, I wasn't sure what would happen with stress, and I get really irritable.
Well, so let's go back to the model and make sure the model structure is appropriate. So is there anything you would add to this based on that scenario?
So maybe if I'm really productive, I get less stressed. So I might add a negative relationship between those two.
All right. And maybe a small? Or...
Yeah, probably small.
All right. So let's go back to the scenario and see if it changes anything. Not much. But you can imagine a situation if you get something that's highly unexpected. So this may be a little surprise in the scenario.
But
if-
it makes sense because I'm not getting sleep, so I'm stressed out.
All right, so now we've built the model and we've evaluated for its structure. We've looked at the scenario output to make sure that it makes sense. And if it doesn't make sense, we've gone back and changed some of the structure of the model. But now let's say we're pretty happy with our model and want to save it. Let's talk about how to save your model. So now we're back in Mental Model. We've saved it. We're going to navigate up here to the Save tab. And we're going to click Save. Okay. And in some cases, it's either going to save, I can navigate to where I want to save it. Let's say I want to save it to my desktop. And I want to call it Allison Loves Coffee. I can save it as an MMP file directly to my desktop. If it doesn't come up to navigate to your desktop or to navigate where you want to save it, it may be saved to your downloads. So be sure to look in your downloads if you can't find the MMP file. So the last step is about loading a model. So let's say, Allison, I want to send you a model and you want to open up Mental Modeler and load up my model.
Sounds exciting.
Oh, it is. So what we would do in that case is open up the online Mental Modeler tool, go to Load, navigate to where that file loaded, Allison Loves Coffee, and there it is. So we hope this brief tutorial has given you enough information where you can get started in a pretty quick way, navigating to the software, understanding how to build a mental model, understanding how to evaluate the structure of the mental model and run scenarios, and then how to save it and send your model to someone else. Thanks so much for listening.
Thank you.